Welcome back to Poetry and VGC. My name is Big Mike. Thank you for joining us again. And today I am joined once again by Big Kriten. Say hi.
Hi.
And this is the second take that we are doing of this. What poem are we doing today?
I Wandered Lonely as a Cloud by William Wordsworth.
All right, let's get started. I Wandered Lonely as a Cloud by William Wordsworth. I wandered lonely as a cloud that floats on high o'er vales and hills, when all at once I saw a crowd, a host of golden daffodils, beside the lake, beneath the trees, fluttering and dancing in the breeze. Continuous as the stars that shine and twinkle on the Milky Way, they stretched in never-ending line along the margin of a bay. 10,000 saw I at a glance, tossing their heads in a sprightly dance. The waves beside them danced, but they outdid the sparkling waves in glee. A poet could not but be gay in such a jocund company. I gazed and gazed, but little thought what wealth the show to me had brought. For oft, when on my couch I lie in vacant or in pensive mood, they flash upon that inward eye, which is the bliss of solitude, and then my heart with pleasure fills, and dances with the daffodils. That was I Wandered Lonely as a Cloud by William Wordsworth, and we are going to get the expert opinion. The expert opinion on this poem. All right, go for it.
Well, I can start with the background. So, William Wordsworth is a early 1800s romantic poet. It's based on most of Wordsworth's poetry is based on his own travels and experiences with nature. If I remember right, this one is discussing his experiences while walking around the countryside. They mainly impacted him for how it's talking about his imagination and remembering about the flowers. Let's see, what can I pull from here? He talks a lot about how the daffodils affect him positively because of the sheer amount of them. A daffodil is not a traditional flower that would be revered or used in um, floral arrangements or anything fancy. It's just a common weed. So he is admiring the beauty of the common in nature as opposed to going for these lofty, great subjects like most traditional poets would. He is admiring the mundane and the normalcy. So it stands out already as a poem as he's not looking for some overarching grand concept. He's here to talk about the here and now.
I like in the third line of the poem, he sort of personifies the daffodils by using the word crowd, like what we would
Mm-hmm.
typically use as a crowd of people. That sort of adds to the effect that it has on him. He sees it and he responds to it so positively that he sort of is adding a little bit of a human nature to the daffodils.
Mm-hmm. About how, like in line 12, where they're tossing their heads in sprightly dance
Right.
because of the wind blowing through them.
Yes. Also, in that second stanza, the first two lines also gives them a sort of, I guess, divinely, not maybe divine, but when he's comparing them to the stars in the Milky Way, gives them some sort of grander element to them. Again, going past
Very
the mundane.
romantic.
Right. Yeah. Going past the mundane and giving it such uh, an important feel to it.
Mm-hmm. And stars to romantic poets typically represented mystery or a lot of Grecian mythology. So when something's compared to stars, then it's not what it seems. So it's representing that there will be a metaphor later in the poem. You just have to find it.
Okay. Well, did you find it? Hello.
Hey.
Hey, I was wondering if you had found that metaphor that you talked about.
Oh, well, the overarching one, at least, is that these daffodils are inspiring him to think about his past and remember all of the experiences that he had just wandering through nature. As like, far oft when on the couch I lie in vacant or in pensive mood, they flash upon that inward eye, and it brings him joy to think about his past experiences. So for him, every time he passes a daffodil, it's a reminder of all of his joy in his life, which shows that it doesn't take some grand gesture for you to find the happiness and joy. You can find it in the simplest of flowers, even a common weed.
That is very profound. Thank you. So I noticed in this poem that it's the last stanza that sort of brings it down to earth almost. Takes the imagery that the author spends the first 3 stanzas and brings it back to a realistic setting. Do you think that's, in your experience, is that common in poems like this? That like the metaphor is established and then nailed home in the last stanza?
Well, yes and no. For Wordsworth, yes. He normally likes to open his poems with grandiose ideas, and it's a lot of major nature imagery, mystical elements, but then he brings it back into a understanding or something that you're supposed to take from the poem in the last stanza. Not necessarily in all romantic poetry, though. This is one of his shorter works. Most of Wordsworth, Coleridge, Keats, they were all around the same kind of romantic European era, and they wrote like these huge epic poems that would blow things completely out of proportion, and then they would funnel back at the last minute just so you would understand the meaning and why they would do it. So it varies, but yeah, it makes more sense for him to open with this is what I saw, this is how it made me feel, this is why you should remember why I'm talking about a flower.
Very nice. Okay, I will finish up this analysis with one last question. Why do you like this poem?
Romantic literature is by far my favorite genre because it combines the mystical with the mundane. It tackles how poetry is supposed to make you feel, and it's focused less on the physical gaudiness, but more on bringing out it's the untraditional, and it's trying to find the word. I know what I'm going for. Give me a second. It's not utopian. It's slightly utopian, but it's more it's grotesque, but not in a bad way. It's meant to make you fully think on what you're considering as poetry. Because before this, most poetry would be either reserved for major high figures, it could be religious, but it was important that you were writing this. Romanticism turns that on its head and is like, it's just a daffodil. Take from it what you want. This is what I see, kind of a thing. And I like that.
Well, thank you very much for your input. Real quick, in the last few seconds that we have, in this video, I had ran into 3 trick room teams in a row, and I was kind of sick of it, and I lost the first 2, and I saw this third one, and I said, I am not losing this time. So I let off with my Duraludon, and I turn 1, I click Steel Beam against the Hatterene to make sure that it would not be a problem, and it was an 80% chance to Oko, and it did, and I was super happy, and it was pretty easy from there. So again, I want to thank Big Kriten for joining us in this battle. Not in this battle, in this poetry analysis with the battle in the background. Thank you again for being with us, and I hope everyone enjoyed this video, and we'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.
Bye.